How you doing? Welcome to this week's Connect Group Bible study.
This week we have a reading from 1 Samuel chapter 22 verses 1 to 2. So it's like super short, 2 verses.
Blink
and you'll miss it.
Yeah, in a moment we're going to read it together. But before, we just wanted to share this with you. Padlet.com/Damalas/Cave of Adullam. We've recreated the slightly messy OneNote view in Padlet, which you might have been using and come across. It's a great little app.
It's slightly neater for all you engineers.
Yeah, slightly neater. And basically we've put the passage in there with some of the extra information, and you can comment on it and you can rate it up. You can also start new conversations in it, and all the Connect groups are going to share this so you can see everybody's content there. But you might like to use that as a way of putting your thoughts out there and marking the passage as we read it, and have a go. Let us know if you think that's any good.
Yeah.
So that's...
Shall I read it? Oh no, you give us the context first.
Oh yeah, okay.
Give us a bit of context to the passage.
So David has risen through the ranks from a lowly shepherd all the way through to a leader in the king's court of King Saul, who eventually then, because of envy, turns on him. David then has to flee for his life, leaving behind his family, his friends, his fortune, and he becomes a fugitive, and he goes to a place called Nob and ends up lying to a priest to remain... Did you just laugh?
Sorry.
He has to lie to a priest to remain safe, and then he escapes to a place called Gath, but there he's recognised and has to pretend to be insane to escape, and he eventually ends up in the cave of Adullam. So he's basically gone from the highest heights to living in a cave, the lowest lows, and that's where our reading begins.
It's like a soap opera.
Yeah. So Kate,
are we ready? Let's go. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. That's
great.
it.
So
Finished.
That's it. So this passage starts with David all alone, and we see God transform his life and do something pretty incredible. But it starts with him all alone. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Now, I mean, it even sounds sad, doesn't it? But it actually means refuge. Now, the cave is a key theme in the life of David. It's where he learns most of his life lessons, his trade, keeping the flocks as a shepherd. He kept them in a cave. He learns forgiveness in a cave. You can read that in 1 Samuel 24. If you think about a cave is like a strange place because it's often dark. Things seem scarier in the dark. It's a literal echo chamber, so voices seem louder in a cave. It can be a way of escapism. You can run to your man cave or woman cave, and time. In a cave, there's lots of time. There's boredom, frustration, there's space. It can mean things that we've ignored come to the forefront. And one of the things I think is worth thinking about is that we all have an internal cave of Adullam where we go to complain about things to ourselves. And it's just worth noting that because especially at this time where some of us might feel trapped in a place that feels like an echo chamber, we want to escape, we've got a lot of time on our hands maybe, or not much time on your hands. You might be feeling the pressure at the moment, but this kind of season can feel like a cave of Adullam. And so really the amazing thing is David uses this time to pray and to worship, and we actually get 2 psalms, Psalm 57 and Psalm 142, that come and he writes when he had fled from Saul into the cave. And so David turns this time of tragedy into a time of prayer and worship. It's pretty honest prayer and worship, as we'll come back to later on. But I suppose the first question is this.
I love this question. What is the current soundtrack of your cave?
Yeah.
Here's some examples. This is what we mean.
Okay, so maybe you're feeling a bit like Aladdin. It's like you're kind of enjoying
the mystery of it.
The new mystery of working out life from home. Or
when will it end?
Maybe you're loving it, like Mumford and Sons and their cave song. Or maybe it's just very scary for you, like Lord of the Rings, or like the Hunger Games. You're not quite sure what's going on. Okay, but what's the soundtrack of your cave? What are the internal conversations happening inside you at the moment? Let's chat about that.
Discuss.
Okay, so as well as the internal cave, there's the cave, like a social cave, if you like, which is the company that we keep. We read this: when his brothers, who, let's be honest, his brothers and his fathers go and join him. Now, this is not good news. His brothers, they never liked him to begin with. And his father's household, his father, who, let's remember, forgot he existed one time and like doesn't even name him, doesn't even bring him out to see his brothers get anointed, like go down to join him there. It's like, this is not a fun family reunion. And also because as David grew in influence, so did his family. And so as David loses influence, so does his family. It's like snakes and ladders. So he's now carrying both the weight of his disappointment, but also that disappointment of his family.
Wow.
It's worth being aware when we're trying to carry other people's disappointment. Like, I mean, David knew disappointment because his family were disappointed in him, but now they're even more disappointed. And maybe that's why he ends up being able to lead these people that we're about to meet, because he knows what it's like to be ignored, to be on the outside. And obviously we read in 1 Corinthians, God uses that which is weak to shame the strong. And so there's all those dynamics going on in there. But his family join him. And then also those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him. And like, this is a team of needy people. Like his first team meeting was all the people no one else wanted. They couldn't take an offering because they owed more than they had. They were very needy. And like, it's a bit worth it. Like those are emotions we all encounter, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's some questions that are kind of, you don't need to ask now, but these are just to kind of think about conceptually to kind of help you enter into those feelings and connect those and see those in yourself. One question that to kind of mull over is, how does it feel to be in distress? How do you act when you're distressed? That's to connect with the distress emotion. When we're looking at kind of the in debt feeling, a good question would be, what areas of our lives are we not fully free and feel in debt? And the discontented emotion, a good question to kind of feel that out within yourself would be, how does it feel to be discontented, and are you feeling that now?
When you're discontented, it's often that results in complaining, and I've heard it described like this: complaining is like picking a scab. It feels good in the moment but leaves you feeling raw. And it's like, I think, and you've got these people and they gather round David, and this is the social cave. Sandy Miller used to say, every company, every community has a cave of Adullam where people gather around to complain. This is the meeting after the meeting where people say what they really thought think, but were like too afraid to say it in the meeting. Some WhatsApp groups are a cave of Adullam, and a really simple thing is, at the moment especially, you need to decide how much you watch the news. Probably limit it down to once or twice a day. Don't just be living in the cave of the news constantly, because the news isn't updating as quickly as that. Miles said this to us recently. He said, we're very skilled at curating the voice we put out on social media, but often we aren't as intentional about curating the voices we allow in. And so a key kind of question is like, who's in the cave with us? And really why this passage came to me recently to preach on Sunday was because when it reminded me of a few weeks ago, we were looking at John 5 and the pool of Bethesda, and where it's the blind, the lame and the invalids are gathered round, and Jesus steps in and brings hope for the hopeless. And really those two are sort of a mirror image of each other. And basically in both circumstances, you've got people who are victims of their circumstance. And to be honest, this is a risk for all of us. We can all get stuck in that, because pain, it's been said, matters more than matter matters. In other words, you can have all your material needs met, but if your mind is in pain, you can end up stuck in this cave. And the amazing thing is, in that John story, we see Jesus lead people out of that place, and we're going to see David do that as well. But it's worth just one more thing before this question. See, they gather round him. And the thing is, people in this kind of situation don't tend to gather round to give, but to get. and often mainly it's attention. Now, we shouldn't begrudge people this, but we do have to be aware of that and then adjust our expectations accordingly.
The rest will always be disappointed.
Yeah, and then we end up replicating what we're sort of seeing in others that isn't great. And David recognizes this. He says in those Psalms, I'm in the midst of lions, I'm forced to dwell with ravenous beasts, hungry people whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp sword. Or it says, look and see, there is no one at my right hand, no one concerned for me. I have no refuge, no one cares for my life.
Honest. We can be honest with God. It's good. So the question now for you guys to discuss is who is in your cave?
I think another way to think about it is
you?
those who are around you at the moment, either in your house or in your workplace via Zoom or however you're doing it. How are they doing? How are they doing?
Who's in your cave? How are they?
How are they doing? And you probably don't want to name names if things go really hard, but and then pray for each other because it's really helpful to be aware of the situation that we are in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last bit we see is it says this. So you've got these people, his family who don't like him, and all those who are in distress, debt or discontent, blah, blah, blah. And he became their commander. Now, this is the first time that David gets called a commander. He's going to become King David, the leader of leaders. Still talk about him today. This is the moment he gets called commander. But this is not a great position, okay? This is like I made the soloist of the Klang Valley Kazoo Band. I got made CFO of 1MDB. This is not a great position. This is a promotion without a pay rise, okay? Yet David did not despise the day of small beginnings. He did not despise the day of weak teams. And this is the thing, and this was a pun and I didn't mean it, but in these moments we get the choice to either step up or cave in. And the temptation is that instead of stepping into leadership, we retreat from engagement. Leadership is messy and it's hard, and it's much easier to cave into yourself and to retreat into just what we can manage and just mock and critique what we can't from the outside, from the safety of our cave. And David resists this. He resists this and he steps up. And this is the thing. We read about 400 men were with him. So it starts with David alone going to a cave all by himself, and it finishes with him surrounded by people. And it's like God gives him more than he can manage. You couldn't lead this many good, sound, well-balanced people, let alone this bunch. And it's this sense that, you will always be called along the lines of your competency. David is a king, he gets called to be kingly and to lead. He's a leader, he gets called to lead. But God will always call you beyond your competency, so you end up in a place where you have to trust him. And that's probably what a lot of us are experiencing now, speaking to people who are managers and things, working out new ways of organising your business, managing people, looking after your family, all these kind of things. And I suppose for some this is what's happened for us with this MCO. We started out in isolation. In some ways, we're crowded on Zoom meetings with even more people than we would normally. Some of us are seeing more people via video conference than we would on most day. And this sense that God calls us out of our comfort zone. Now, under David's leadership, though, the thing is, these people do not stay this way. See, God calls him to lead in the cave. But to be able to lead in the cave, you have to be willing to be in the cave. And David is willing to be in this cave, and the people change. Look at this. He starts with these people, and he starts with a crowd of people who don't like him. They're victims of their circumstances, but he ends up with a core of mighty warriors who shape the direction of their nation and are loyal to David, loving him more than they love their own lives. 10 years later, we read these are the names of David's three mighty warriors. I can't even begin to pronounce those names. But there's these three mighty warriors. Then we're told about the 30, and then there's just 4 others. So you get 37 great leaders who all come come from this cave.
What a transformation.
It is such a transformation. It's like we, invest in your youth and children's pastors because they're looking after the leaders of the next generation. They're under their care. Like there's people that you need to look after and invest in, because from under their leadership are going to come the leaders who are going to lead this nation and lead our church into what God has for us. But the thing is, there's that phrase, people often overestimate what they can do in a year, underestimate what they can do in 5. And I think it's this: don't underestimate what can be done with a weak team. But also, don't underestimate the time and energy it will take. It takes time. This is 10 years later. But the good news is, because God, it's that saying, God's not growing mushrooms. Mushrooms grow overnight. Oaks take a long time. God is growing leaders. It takes time. It's also hard work. There's a ratio of 400 to 37. But the thing is...
Wow, that's not great odds.
Well, it depends how you see it, because the thing is, you can lead 400 people with 37 people. You can't lead 400 people with one person, but you can lead 400 with 37, and you don't need them all to be at the same level at the same time. God is patient and he's committed to the whole group.
And God knows what you need.
Yeah. And so here's our third question.
Transformation. Where have you seen this happen? Where have you seen it in your life and in others' lives? Have you seen people transform beyond belief? You don't have to answer all of these, but pick your favorites. Another question would be, God is patient and is playing the long game. So where is he asking you to be patient at the moment? And another question would be, what caves is Jesus asking you to step into and lead in this season?
Great. And so our last little bit, just to quickly finish, is that to see this as how God leads you. See, if you primarily view this as, I am David and this is advice on how to lead, you'll end up distressed because it's hard. You'll end up in debt to your own disappointed expectations. You'll end up discontented as a grumbler. But if you view this as, I am one of the 400 and Jesus has come to lead me, despite my distress, my debts and discontent, that will start to birth gratitude and a joy that will sustain your leadership of others. This is me before ye. That's as good as I could get. I'm sorry.
Nice, I like it.
This story,
Shakespearean.
this story points to Jesus, an even greater king in an even greater exile, who gathers around him the last, the least, and the lost. First his disciples, and then his church, and he trains and prepares them for the day when he shall rule and reign on his throne for the whole world.
I got goosebumps.
See, in Micah, this is the prophecy. I will again bring a conqueror to you, inhabitants of the Maharashara. I fumbled that. Maharashara. The glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. And the glory of Israel came in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And he is our leader. And a great leader can bring about a great change. And as God was David's shepherd, the Lord is our shepherd as well. Jesus is our great leader. And we can know that even in the hardest times, that God is patient with you. It might take 10 years, it might take longer. Also, he's committed to all of you. Don't be discouraged. Not all of our life will be firing on all cylinders at all times. Remember, we are in the midst of a global pandemic that none of us have lived through before. It's okay to not be fully okay.
Yeah.
Go easy on ourselves. But he's
Kind to
committed.
yourself.
He's committed to all of us, and he's committed to the long game. And I love this. I don't know who said it originally, but from Mary's womb to Jesus's tomb, we see that God does his best work in dark places, and you can know that he's wanting to do that in your life in this season.
So that brings us to our last question, question 4. Which caves is he leading you out of this season? And we don't mean your home. You're not
stay at
allowed,
home.
unless you're just one person in the car, like going for groceries and you're the head of the household. Which caves is he leading you out of this season? Where do you want to see Jesus transform you in this strange season?
And what will those changes mean?
Yeah.
Because changes, there's a cost. It's always worth it whenever Jesus asks it. but it's being aware of it as well.
And we thought a really good way for you guys to finish your gathering today, this meeting today, is to just read Psalm 57, like a prayer over you. Get someone to read Psalm 57 and just pray that over the group.
So that would be a great way to finish tonight. But before then, let's pray and invite the Holy Spirit to come and to fill us afresh. Okay, will you pray for us?
Yeah. Lord, you're so good and you are so kind. And I thank you that you don't leave us alone in our caves. Lord, I ask that you would fill our hearts with your love, that you would transform us, make us aware of the feelings that we have so we can pour them out to prayer and worship to you, honest prayer and worship like David. And we ask as we do that, that your Spirit would fill every single person with your peace, and even surprise them with your joy in this what is a hard season for many people. We ask that you'd fill them. Amen.